I kind of wondered if she lost her one opportunity for a successful relationship out of the top 4.
Hi, we are Julie and Kelly, and we are here to find love. We are going to be recapping Michelle Young's Bachelorette season and talking about each of the hometowns that she had with her top 4, Brandon, Rodney, Joe, and Nayte. So let's start off first with Brandon, who, okay, Kelly, I'm really happy that he's in my top 2 because he has won me over. So what did you think about their dynamic after seeing him and his family? I know that he's a cornball, but I just want to hear what you think about him.
Well, and there were so many people in our comments kind of commenting about Brandon in our last video.
Yeah, it reaffirmed my validation for him. I was like, okay, maybe I did see something.
Yeah, people are on the Brandon train. I feel like maybe I just I missed the boat on Brandon in the first couple of episodes. I was too put off corny by the smooth talking, which everyone said it. Michelle said it. Even his family was like, yeah, he can sometimes do that, but he's a good guy at heart. And it seems like that seems to be the truth. He seems to be just a really sweet guy at the heart of it. Yeah. And, I'm really happy that she kept him around as long as she did, because I feel like we're starting to finally see his true colors and his true personality, and his true personality seems to be just very sweet. He's like a puppy dog. It's just it's just so cute. Now, my only apprehension is that I just don't necessarily know that they are a good fit long term. Julie, you brought this up in our last episode, this idea that he kind of has a little bit of a puppy love kind of thing going on, and I just kind of wonder if he is the type to just kind of lean all the way into love and romance, but then when push comes to shove, things might fall apart. Or maybe it's even part of me doesn't quite believe that Michelle actually likes him for him as much as she does his adoration and commitment. I think it's really hard to not like someone. Or it's so easy to kind of go along with a relationship where your partner is just so into you, they like you so much, they're so committed, and they're kind of giving you everything that you want, the adoration, the dedication, the commitment. It can kind of make you feel oh, this is a good relationship, I should stay in it, right? Even if you might not actually like that person. And I wonder if that might be kind of what's going on with Michelle and Brandon. Michelle so wants to be with someone who is committed and super into her, and Brandon is both of those things, but I just don't necessarily know that she really likes him, for him, or likes his whole personality. I just don't think she lights up with him the way that she lights up with, Nayte, for example.
That's a really astute observation, because I do agree that Brandon's enthusiasm is definitely, that's what makes him a very strong contender for Michelle, because she does want to be chosen and Brandon is choosing her, and he's so delighted to choose her, and it's very palpable how much she can really tell okay, this man is enthused by me. So I do think that his smooth talking right now, it does kind of speak to this childlike view of love that he has. It's very wonderful, I think, to be in the presence of that. He's very much romantic in terms of he looks at a girl and he's you are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my whole life, and he genuinely means it. Every time he says it, he's I have never seen anyone as pretty as you, or anyone that is as funny as you. He fully believes in that. And as another romantic, I'm Brandon, I like that you can access that squishy side of you. But I do think that if he doesn't temper it with some type of realism, or their relationship isn't buffered by other experiences outside of that early spark, then it will fall flat. Enthusiasm really can't push you into that next phase. You have to show different sides of you. The relationship truly feels like a high school love sweetheart thing. That giddiness and that excitement towards each other that I think makes him very, very compelling as a contender. Yeah. I can see him as a top 3, maybe a top 2, but not the top, not the final person.
Julie, so people who are just tuning in now, me and Julie are in a fantasy league, and we guessed from episode 1. We tried to guess who would make it all the way to the end. We just watched one episode and then like tried to pick the winners based on that first episode. And Julie picked out Brandon. She kept him. You kept him to the top 2. I mean, I'm shocked. I really did not see that coming. When I saw that you picked Brandon, I was like, really,
I know.
Julie?
I bet everyone was making fun of me. They were just in their corner laughing.
But you knew. You don't knew. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just going to shut up. And, like, I still don't buy it. But, clearly I've been wrong up until now. So I'm just going to shut up and move on. So
I just think that because I worked in matchmaking before. So, like, matchmaking, a lot of it is, like, if you find a spark of someone, people just crave it so much. And I've talked about that in previous videos. Yeah. I think that, like, in Michelle's version of The Bachelorette, it is very nice to be with someone that gives you that spark and then fans it every single time that they see you, just in terms of how they look at you. And that brings us to Rodney, because Rodney, I think he also looks at Michelle like that. During their date, he just, like, was like, I need to take this in. You can tell he's so captivated by her. What did you think
really
about...
Cute.
I know, it was I loved their date. It's always about apples. And I love that it's like this long running joke between them, from like the very first meet. Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah. I think that with Rodney, I was really surprised. So of the top 4, Rodney was the one that Michelle sent home. I was really surprised to see it, honestly. I kind of thought that Rodney, of the top 4, I think Rodney is the one that I would most, like, ship Michelle with. Like, I would most, I think
he would be
they
so
seem
genuine.
the most compatible. I think that they have these varying levels of different ways of connecting with each other, if that makes sense. So, like, they could be so playful, like they are just always laughing, which Michelle brought up so much. It's just like there's like this best friend energy between them, where they just can kind of, and you saw that in their date and in the different, like, cuts, like, of the way that they're just, like, interacting with each other. They're just always making jokes and laughing. And I think that Michelle is that type of person. She really does likes to be, a little playful. And so I felt like Rodney really brings that out of her in a way that I think none of the other guys really brought that out of her. Like, I feel like she's, like, nervous around Nate. Joe is so quiet, and she's kind of quiet around him, too. Brandon, you get a little bit of that, but I just feel like with Rodney, she really, like...
She's like, so light.
Right. It's like jokes on jokes, and they just were like really vibing. And, you want to be with someone that kind of brings out the best in you, and with someone who kind of just makes you feel good. I think she said that as she was leaving that date. She was like, when I'm with Rodney, I just feel good. And that's what you want. You want to be with someone who, when you're with them, you're like, this just really feels good to be around.
You're right. He's like he's like Goldilocks in that entire top 4 situation. He is just enough romance, just enough best friend, just enough of that giddy horniness that I think she has of some of the other men that are still competing for her heart.
This kind of brings us to Joe, because this was one of the things that Joe and Nate, this was one of the things that I was kind of concerned about both of them, was just that both of them kind of have a little bit of, like, high school boy vibes, if that makes sense. Like, both of them, like, it's okay to not have relationship experience. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good partner once you enter into a relationship. And there's nothing wrong also with not wanting to be in relationships in general. Like, I don't think that makes you more emotionally immature or anything. Like, whatever, if you don't want to be in a relationship, don't be in a relationship, it's fine. But I did kind of get the sense from Joe's hometown, like, he was so reserved in this episode. I wasn't sure what was going on. Like, he felt even more quiet and reserved than in previous episodes. I don't know if there was something happening behind the scenes or something weird with his family. I mean, and his whole family was also, like, really quiet and awkward, which, again, is okay. Like, being, asking people to come be in front of a camera and, like, talk about their children's love lives. It is a little weird and it is a little awkward. So I think it's okay, but I don't know. I just kind of got the sense that Joe isn't the type of person who has ever really meaningfully dialogued with his own emotions. Like, the lack of a girlfriend isn't the problem as much as it is the fact that I don't think that he really interfaces a lot with his feelings. Like, he kind of talked about how he had this really terrible injury that kind of really shook his life, and he talked about being suicidal, and his mom was like, oh yeah, he kind of just like shut down and went away. Like, and that kind of concerned me. It was like he had all of this stuff that was going on inside of him, but did anyone know? Did he talk to anyone? Did he do anything with that? Has he healed from that? It's hard to be in a relationship with someone who you kind of need to teach how to be a human, if that makes sense. Or like, it's kind of hard to be in a relationship with someone where you feel like you're teaching them how to do the thing, you know? And it's not the lack of relationship experience that makes you like this. I think it's something else. It's something else that it's like, just like, I don't know if it's like a toxic masculinity thing or just that was my fear with Joe's date. I don't know what you thought about it.
I thought the same thing after we met his dad and they had that whole conversation. Like, if he didn't have that model to him by like his father figure growing up, that it was okay to talk about your emotions and it was okay to like be weak, especially in like being an athlete growing up, I think that would definitely overemphasize your strength and your physicality versus like the softness of who you are as a person. Yeah. And then like for his sister-in-law to point that out several times throughout the episode. Like, the men of this family do not really talk. They're very like quiet. I can see Joe kind of like pulling out a little bit. I think that you're spot on, Kelly, in terms of like, there are some relationships that people can have throughout their lives where you feel more like a teacher and they feel like a student, or vice versa. Like, someone is really someone is like really developed in this one sense and they're teaching it to their partner. And because Michelle is a teacher and she's an educator, like, she already naturally assumes that role of like authority and just someone that like has to communicate her point very concisely to like a large group of people. It's a skill that she's developed professionally that she can funnel into her romantic life. And it's like, I can see that with Joe. I think she would be okay in that position. I feel very iffy about like that dynamic in general of like, how much do you teach someone, especially if they don't really have any experience with like emotional regulation. Like, they don't know how to recognize their emotions. They suppress it. That to me shows like you're a beginner to your feelings. Is it really up to your partner to help you? Maybe. But can it slide into codependency? Yes. So like,
yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
Really well said. It's almost like a core mismatch, right? It's like Michelle Kent, because she is a teacher and she's so good at this stuff and she's so in touch with her emotions. She's clearly done so much inner work. I'm sure she can lead Joe to the water, but it's like, should she have to? Why can't she just, like, there's so many wonderful people in the world, so many wonderful men who have these really rich inner lives that I think would not like depend on Michelle to teach them, but they could like push each other to grow, as opposed to this, it's like kind of one way where it's like she's pushing him and it's like, is Joe ever gonna really be pushing Michelle to grow? I don't think so, you know, because I think that he's just so, like you said, a beginner to his own feelings. And so I just think that there's it's not that the relationship couldn't work. I just think that there could be better fits for Michelle that are more conducive to Michelle's growth and to Michelle's well-being. Like, I think Joe would get a lot from being in a relationship with Michelle, but I wonder how much Michelle would get from being in a relationship with Joe, if that makes sense.
Right. And if we're really wanting to take it back like another step of like parental dynamics, she said that Joe reminds her of like her dad and her brother. So like maybe that is a dynamic that she's seen repeated in her household, where like the woman, you know, they have access to like their inner world a lot more readily than like the men do. And it's up to her if she wants to step into that, because she's seen it and it's familiar. But to your point, it's really nice when two people naturally just want to go to the same place instead of you tugging a person along and convincing them that this is the right avenue for you to like express yourself. It's a little bit exhausting.
Obviously, there are social forces in play here. There's a reason why men, you know, don't tend to be in touch with their emotions, and it's because they're raised that way, right? As you pointed out, you know, boys are taught to care about sports and their like physicality and things like that, as opposed to being in touch with their inner worlds. And boys are taught to focus on that stuff and to not cry and to not have emotions other than anger. And so, you know, that influences the way men in America learn how to dialogue with their own feelings, and I'm sure this is true in other places as well. And so, you know, there are social forces in play here. So it's not like a personal character flaw of Joe or any other guy. It's just more like the water that we swim in, or the water that guys swim in. But it's also not innate. Like, I don't think it's innate that men are just bad at talking about feelings. Like, I don't think that's true. I think we've taught men to be bad at talking about their feelings.
I'm so glad that you brought up toxic masculinity, because a lot of people, like, they like to shit on men, and they just like to, you know, like, just say, like, they're oppressive, and we live in a patriarchy, so it's easy to kind of see them as villains. But they've also grown up in a society that deeply rewards their accomplishments and their output versus anything internal. So it is a lifelong journey to reclaim those parts of yourself that, like, have been not, like, super appreciated and teased out of you the same way that women have had the experience of doing.
Exactly.
And we are talking about it in a very gendered way. So, yeah, like, I do think that Joe represents a really specific male experience that happens systematically, where you grow up and you're really, like, half of you is rewarded and the other half of you is kind of, like, taken from you. And then when you do have those experiences, like the injuries, how do you cope with that when you've just been taught to rely on the things that are now giving you pain, you know, like your accomplishments and your basketball, whatever. So
absolutely,
yeah, I feel for him. I really liked him after that date, but I was like, is he ready to get engaged? I don't know if he even knows.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I think he has in a previous episode talked about going to therapy. So to some extent, maybe there is some of that work that's been done there. But, you know. But
relationships, man, that's a playground, you know, once you're in it.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like, to your point, Julie, like, this is no individual person's fault or dude's fault. Like, you know, the patriarchy hurts men too. And this is a great example of it. It's like, you know, I think of, I mean, you know, with Joe in particular, I think of the fact that he kind of has said that he, like, these people in his life, he hasn't been able to, like, tell them about his feelings, right? It's like his mom didn't even know that he went through this, like, suicidal episode related to his injury. Like, she didn't even know that. She was like, he just kind of shut down and went away. And it's kind of like, that's the other piece of it. I feel like it's so common for men to not have any emotional connections or anyone who they can talk to about their feelings, no real intimacy outside of their romantic relationships, right? Just because men are just not, versus women will talk to their friends about this all the time. They'll talk to their moms about this. Women will talk to, you know, women will talk to anyone who will listen and talk about their feelings, right? This is a generalization, of course, but, you know, generally speaking, there is just like a challenge that I think men face in a kind of masculine, like, toxic masculine patriarchal society where men are not given the opportunity or not affirmed in talking about their feelings. And so they don't have anyone to do this with other than with romantic partners. And then their romantic partners end up being in this weird kind of, like, teaching role or in this, like, codependent role where, you know, if the relationship ends, they'll go back to not having anyone to talk about their feelings with, right? Because they only have had their romantic partners to do this with. And so, and then if you don't have a lot of relationship experience, that functionally means you have never had anyone to talk about your feelings with in this intimate way. And so, you know, relationships become this, like, the only avenue to get that intimacy from or to get that type of emotional connection from. And it shouldn't be that way, but I think often it ends up that way for men because of these systematic forces. So those are just some of my concerns with Joe. They're not personal, but it makes me wonder about the long-term, I don't know, just compatibility with Michelle, if that makes sense. So let's talk about Nayte. So, I mean, what were your thoughts, Julie, on the whole Nayte date and everything that came up on his hometown?
I have my red flags up about him more so. I do have him pegged as, like, my top one, you know, like, I think he's going to be the person that makes it to the end. I just don't know. Like, I think him and Joe just have a really similar type of like love story narrative that Michelle might be into. Like, they kind of both remind me of like that impossible crush that you have in high school. Like, they are the dream boat. They are the people that you've always wanted to date. You see them across the hallway and your fantasies just go into overdrive. I think they both represent that like fairy tale for her. So like I think that it provides this like veil of like mythology on them that like makes it harder to see who they really are, which is, you know, maybe Joe's emotional inaccessibility and then Nate's emotional immaturity in terms of like his, it's okay that you haven't been in relationships, but if you're getting engaged, I think that there is some element of like, how well do you know each other? How long have you been in relationships that have gone through all of these different ups and downs? So you really understand the commitment of an engagement. It's not just a Neil Lane ring and proposing at the end of the day. This is like you embarking into a very serious life of someone if they're both theoretically taking the engagement at face value in terms of like, you know, we're doing this with the intention of getting married and having kids. So with Nate, yeah, it just showed a little bit. I was like, okay, first time a person is ever meeting his parents, for his parents to name that, like, he's maybe not ready. Like, they're advocating for him. So, like, if they're saying these things, it should be perking up a little bit of a, hey, let me just slow down and let me really look at him.
Right.
Instead of just, you know, getting excited about how tall and cute he is to me.
Right. I mean, it's confusing. He's so handsome. So it's like, he's so charming. And like she even, when she first saw him on the date, she was like, I always get nervous around you. And that to me is like actually a bit of a, not a red flag in the sense that it means that they're not a good match, but it just means that you're so early in the relationship. If you're still getting nervous around each other, or if she's still getting nervous around him, there's a little bit of a, like a honeymooning thing that's still happening. And like you definitely don't want to get engaged when you're still like honeymooning, if that makes sense. Like you want to get engaged when you're kind of like far past the honeymoon stage. You're like, the rose-colored glasses are off, you've been through ups and downs, and you know you can go through it together and still want to be together. Like that's when you should decide to commit to someone for the rest of your life. But committing to someone just based on like the kind of like floaty, like limerence feeling of love, falling in love, like that, it's it's a recipe for disaster, because you don't really know exactly what you're going to get into or what it's going to be like when those feelings fade, which they will, over time. They just naturally do. And I think that, Nate's stepdad brought up such a good point. He was like, what do you like about Michelle? And Nate just went, it's just the feeling I have when I'm around her. I was like, ooh, that's like the worst answer. I was like, you don't have anything you like about Michelle. I knew you would pick up on that. I was like, you just like being in, look, are you in love with Michelle, or are you in love with being in love? Like being in a relationship feels so great. That is true. Like, of course, it feels great to be connecting with someone. Those early stages of dating, early stages of getting into a relationship with someone, they feel so good, because it just feels good to be wanted. It feels good to like love and be loved back. That feels great. It feels good to kiss and share all these like electric little bits and bobs, and then learn about each other's lives. That stuff is so exciting. But if you can't pick out anything that you actually like about this person other than the fact that it's fun to be in a relationship, it's like, and I think that to me, I was just like, ooh, like, I just don't know if Nate meaningfully likes Michelle outside of just like, ooh, it's fun to be in a relationship. I didn't really realize it was so fun to be in a relationship. This is nice. Like, that's kind of like the vibe that I'm getting from Nate. And, to your point, it's like, clearly he's not a relationship guy. His family like really kind of threw him under the bus. Like, he's just not the kind of guy who, it seems like he's never been very big on commitment, which is fine. It's not like there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, why are you here? You're on The Bachelor. This is about getting into serious relationships. Like, that's the whole point of the show. And I don't know, like, did he just expect that Michelle would magically change everything? Like, I don't know what he thought coming onto the show, but he's not a commitment guy. He came onto a show that's all about commitment, and you know, now he's heading toward the end of the thing, and he has to decide whether or not he wants to propose to this girl. And you know, he's kind of said it to his family that he doesn't know if he wants to do that. So, you know, all of it together felt like, to me, just a bunch of little red flags, like you said. Like, not that I think that Nayte himself is a bad guy. It just kind of, it makes me wonder if he really wants to be in this relationship, or if he really wants to be in a relationship with Michelle, or if their relationship has lasted long enough for them to even really know each other in a meaningful way.
Nayte, I think, is approaching it in a much different way, like similar to Brandon. That's a commonality that they share, where they're so swept away in the current of their emotions that they're like, the engagement is the next, it's like the relationship escalator that a lot of people find themselves on, casual dating to like DTR, and then like moving in, blah, you know, like I think that he's kind of on that, and he's not really thinking about it in terms of like, this is a very big deal that I'm doing this. He's just like, my feelings, which are fine, but like when the feeling fades away, will your commitment still last? That's a really big question I have about him.
Yeah, I think that is so well said. And my feeling, just based on what he has said about his own relationship history and what his family has said, is like, no. Like, I just don't really think that he is a big commitment guy, which is okay. Again, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't think that that's necessarily has been his shtick, has been the thing that he, you know, enjoys or is drawn to. Versus, I think, with Brandon, I think, is also swept up in his feelings, but I kind of believe that, like, he'll make a commitment and stick to it. Like, I kind of actually buy that.
Yeah.
But Nayte, I just kind of think that Nayte and Michelle might just have a kind of a core mismatch, similar to Joe and Michelle. I just think with Nayte just seems to be someone who likes to be he just doesn't like to talk about emotions. He has kind of said that over and over, that he's just not a guy who's like in his feelings. It's not a thing he's seen with his family or done with his family. And I just get the sense that he's just a lot more wanting to have fun all the time and not be so serious. And Michelle likes to have fun too, but I do think that Michelle, you know, she has like a pretty serious core, right? Like, she has a lot of things that she cares about, a lot of issues that she cares about. Like, she really likes talking about, like, attacking conflict head on. And like, I just think that she is someone who likes to have a lot of those deep conversations, and I just don't think Nayte is, which makes me think that they might just not be super compatible, in addition to everything that was revealed on this hometown date. You know, I think Joe and Michelle might be a mismatch too, but I sort of think Nayte and Michelle might be more of a mismatch. Like, Joe, because of the kind of not, I guess both of them don't really talk about their emotions too much, is what we've kind of learned from the last couple of dates. And so maybe both of them are kind of a mismatch for Michelle. That doesn't mean that I think Brandon is a better fit, but it just makes me kind of wonder if nobody here is a fit. It just kind of makes me wonder if Michelle made a mistake by sending Rodney home. That's kind of how I feel. And I was just so sad to see him leave. I kind of wondered if she lost her one opportunity for a successful relationship out of the top 4, but we'll see. I mean, we obviously all only can hope for the best here, so yeah.
I can tell out of all of them, she's completely swept away by him. I think that he possesses a lot of different elements to a love story that maybe she has in her head that Nayte is like embodying and actualizing for her, so it's very attractive to fall into that. Yeah, I mean, all of her top 4 men, I think that they are very quality. It's just very interesting to me how, like, they're not the most, I would say, commitment ready. The hometowns revealed a lot for me. I was like, oh my God, I don't know. Like, if she, I mean, for sure, I think that she's going to get engaged. I think they're all lovely people. Maybe not for an engagement, though.
Yeah, I just think that they shouldn't rush into it. I think, you know, any of those relationships could work. There's like too much risk, I think, with all of them currently, that I would not recommend rushing into an engagement with any of them. So me and Julie, again, this is from we watched just episode 1, and then we tried to guess who would make it all the way through the end. So we'll put up who we each guessed would be in Michelle's top 3. So Michelle's actual top 3 was Nayte, Brandon, and Joe are her top 3. Julie, both you and I got tripped up on Clayton. Both of us thought Clayton would be in the top 3. So we both got 2 of them right. Julie, your guesses were Nayte, Clayton, and Brandon. And my guesses were Nayte, Clayton, and Joe. So Clayton was the mess up there. It was, you got Brandon right, I got Joe right. So I think we were both kind of like in the right vicinity for our top 3. But what are your predictions for the rest of the season, all that being said?
I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned about the top 3 now. It would be really attractive if one of the men told her, like, hey, I don't want to get engaged and I just want to continue dating you. Whoever says that wins in my book. Whoever says that is emotionally and like reading the room. They're not only reading the room, but they're reading the realism of what it means to step outside of the show. I wish that they spoke a little bit about like the reality of what it would be like to start the media tour and like be a couple turned from the Bachelor franchise. Whoever tells her that, and whoever is like, hey, I just want to continue dating you with the intention of getting engaged, I'm gonna give you like a promise ring, that person would win it for me. So that's my prediction. But that's just my hopeful wishing. What about you?
Right. I think that's like, it also would speak to a lot of self-awareness, right? For someone to say that, for someone to say,
it'd be very attractive.
Nayte to step up and be like, hey, like, I know that commitments haven't been my thing historically. I'm so into you. I'm so into this relationship and I want to take it seriously. Like, let's not rush into an engagement. I want to keep dating you and getting to know you and see where this takes us. Like, having that, like, that to me does feel a lot more, just self-aware, and like it would be attractive for someone to say something like that. All right, y'all, let us know what you all think about Michelle's top 4 and Michelle's top 3. You know, which relationship do you think has the most ability to last long term? Which one do you think has the most chances of success? Who do you think that she should pick out of her top 3? And who do you think that she will pick? I think there are 2 different questions. Who should she pick and who will she pick? Let us know in the comments down below and let's keep the conversation going. And with that, I think that's all we have for today's episode. We are recapping every episode of The Bachelorette, and we will be recapping Clayton's season as well of The Bachelor, which he has been officially announced to be The Bachelor. So we'll be recapping his season 2. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. Do hit that subscribe button so that we can stay in touch. It's very helpful for us and for our channel, and it helps us be able to push videos out to y'all so you can see it every time we upload a new one. So please do that, and we will see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.